Father Samuel was not always a priest. Before, he had no connection with the church at all. Nobody in his circle would have ever thought that one day, in the most fantastical turn of events, he would become a clergyman. Nathan worked in the police. He was a good detective, but honest, a trait not well received by colleagues and superiors. When Samuel pursued a case, he faced threats more than once, but he always believed that as long as only money and not bloodshed were involved, he would be fine. He was wrong because significant amounts of money were indeed implicated. Digging further meant digging his own grave. However, Samuel believed in justice until the day he understood who stood behind the entire scheme. He received a call. Listen, everyone has something very important in life. For some, it's family. For others, it's money. In our case, it's money. If we lose it, you lose your family. Proudly, he dismissed it. Proud of himself, feeling on top of the world after lunch, he reported that the case was solved. In the evening, as he was preparing to go home, he received a call from a dry, official voice informing him that his wife and son had been shot on the playground. He vaguely remembered what happened next. Only one thing was etched in his memory. He drove to where the culprit of his grief was, but lost control and crashed. He emerged from the hospital 3 months later. His mother-in-law spat at his feet and asked, "Tell me, who needed your honesty?" He started drinking, wallowing, wishing only for a quick death. In this state, he found Father Victor behind the church. He lived with Father Victor for a month, and during their long conversations in the evenings, he decided never to return to the world. 7 years had passed since then. Samuel had been a clergyman for 3 years. He always tried to help, not just with words, but also with deeds. He picked up brothers like himself, warmed and fed a few people who changed a bit, but he considered it a victory. Father Andrew said, "We can start. Everyone is gathered. They'll be here in 10 minutes, but is it possible to hurry?" He looked surprised at the woman. She was the mother of the boy they were burying today, although she seemed too young to be his mother. Well, maybe a stepmother. "I will be soon. This young lady who diligently wiped her eyes with a handkerchief is in a hurry. Strange. Where is the boy's father?" Apparently, the family was not poor. Samuel understood it perfectly. It was not his concern. His job was to comfort the boy's soul, but something bothered him. He wanted to delay the moment as if something was unfinished. He looked at the group, a very young one, around 25 at most. He was about to step back and take his place when the girl, who had been crying until now, suddenly jumped up and collapsed to the floor. 2 friends rushed to support her. Samuel scanned the crowd to find the woman who urged him earlier. She stood next to a young man holding her waist. She glared at her watch. "Damn! She even brought her lover here. Yes, this is such a fool. It's clear that Peter suspected something. You know anything about it?" "If I knew. But when his father died, the will said I would be his guardian until Peter got married. What do you think? He just died 2 weeks before the wedding. You know something?" The young people in the church were talking. Samuel, realizing that he was no longer an investigator, decided to help the boy's soul find peace. "Forgive me, but if the funeral interferes with something, it means the person's soul has not yet completed its affairs in this world. What you say is heresy. Let's start." They gently laid the girl on the table, and the chanting began. Samuel approached the coffin, leaned forward a bit, and suddenly fell silent. He remained silent for a whole minute, still leaning forward. The girl looked at him, astonished, as if expecting words that would correct everything, as if Peter was alive. The shrill voice of Peter's stepmother echoed under the arches again, and Katya continued to stare at the priest, yearning for happiness, remembering her love for Peter. It was tough when they first met. Paul's father was already ill. Doctors gave various predictions, from 3 years to 1. He lived only 1.5 years after Katya and Peter got engaged. After the funeral, Peter insisted on an urgent wedding. Katya was surprised. It had been so little time since his father's death. He looked at her and said, "That's what my dad asked for when he was dying. He said that only then would I be safe. If only I knew what could threaten me." He didn't know, and Katya didn't either. But his father understood, and today proved it. Samuel didn't know what to do. For the first time in his life, he felt so lost. Ideally, he should continue the funeral, but he couldn't. The reason was what he had seen. If he hadn't worked in law enforcement, he wouldn't have noticed this detail. A regular person wouldn't know what it was, but he did. He had once worked with such a thing, a mask that cost a fortune and was challenging to obtain legally. However, if you had makeup artists and artists as friends, it was possible. He looked at the deceased and saw that the mask had come off from one side of the face. Samuel straightened up and people around gasped. He took the edge of the mask and gently pulled. The onlookers were horrified, but the mask easily came off, revealing a completely different person in the coffin, a man in his 30s, obviously from an underprivileged background. Samuel stood up, and people around him were still as statues for about 5 minutes, mouth agape. Then the doors of the church opened wide, letting in a ray of sunlight, and a group of men entered. Among them was the guy whose face Samuel was holding, followed by several men in uniforms. "Hello, Mom. Where are you rushing? We're about to announce the will. It's a pity you won't be able to hear it." The guy's head was bandaged, and Samuel understood that their attempt to kill him had not been successful. The girl began to rise slowly, and Samuel managed to catch her as she started to fall. 2 friends rushed to support her, and Samuel handed her over with the words, "To the air." The woman who had been urging him all along turned to her companion and shouted, "Do something! What are you standing there for?" The man looked bewildered. "What should I do? I mean, I did all this myself. You clean up the mess, and I don't intend to interfere." She almost choked with outrage. "These were all your ideas. You promised me everything would be fine. What, you just set everything on fire? I couldn't even imagine they would stage my son's death." Samuel sighed. Nothing had changed in this world. Absolutely nothing. It was still a world of lies and cruelty. He did the right thing by leaving the woman. She nervously looked at her companion, who almost ran towards the exit. "But what should I do? Handle it yourself. I'm not getting involved." She was left coughing with indignation. "I don't even know what I got myself into." Samuel took a few minutes, then asked what should be done now. Paul looked at the group, at the funeral car, and at his colleagues. "Everything is paid for. Just don't put a plaque with my name. The man in the coffin needs to be buried. However, if the police allow it, in any case, everything is paid for." The people nodded, but it took them about 5 minutes to snap out of it because they were just standing there like statues with their mouths open. Paul then looked at Katya, and she stepped towards him, falling into his arms. Forgive me, dear. I used my father's connections to find you, but what happened? Tell me you forgive me." Samuel smiled. There were so many events that he couldn't keep up with them all. Katya frowned. "Just don't say you won't come. Someone has to bless us. If you enjoyed the story, please support me with a thumbs up. To stay updated on new interesting stories, click the subscribe button and the notification bell. All the best to you.